and surround Jerusalem. So the Lord surrounds his people. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, O Lord. We need to be in your presence. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, O Lord. We need to be in your presence. Surround us, Lord. Surround us, Lord. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, his mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, his mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, his mercy reigns, unending love, amazing grace.
All right, everyone, we are in John chapter 18. This past Sunday, we discussed at length this initial scene that begins to unfold here at the Garden of Gethsemane. Judas and company arriving there in the garden. There's this exchange with Jesus in which his power is demonstrated. He is confirmed to be the one that they are in effect looking for. We talk about some of the implications regarding how they showed up as to what they may have been expecting to unfold here, and whether there was any real reason for that or not. Peter, as he is so often wont to do, acts rather rashly in what could have been, or not what could have been, what was undoubtedly a tense situation, a tinderbox waiting to explode with all of these heavily armed people. And yet, just as he did at the outset, Jesus reasserts control over the situation, tells Peter to put away the sword. And we left off with verse 12. Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him and led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was the high priest that same year. Okay, so a couple of things here. If it seems odd to you that there are two high priests simultaneously, it should, because there ought to be only one high priest. So what exactly gives here? So Caiaphas, and we'll talk a little bit more about him in the next verse, because his name should sound familiar. Caiaphas is the high priest installed by the Romans. You recall that the Romans control everything that's going on here. Even though they allow the Jews a great deal of latitude regarding their own government, their own officials, the way they practice their religion, which was their. It's one of the reasons the Roman Empire was so successful. They conquered the entire Mediterranean world, and one of the things that made Rome particularly successful as an empire is that they pretty much allowed all of these various conquered regions to function as they always had. They could keep their religion. They could keep their local officials, so long as they were willing to toe the line with what Rome wanted, and to pay the tribute that was due, and stay in line, which was, as on a somewhat unrelated note here, constantly a problem in Judea. As we get closer to AD 70, that's going to be increasingly the case. But Rome definitely had things in hand. So Caiaphas is the younger one. He is the one that Rome installs, the one that Rome recognizes. Annas, his father-in-law, would be the one that older, more conservative Jews would have recognized. So if you were to ask the question, who is the legitimate high priest here? Well, it may depend upon who you ask, right? If you ask, maybe a younger, more liberal person who doesn't necessarily have a big problem with the Romans, they would say, well, Caiaphas, undoubtedly. You ask an older, more traditional, more conservative Jew of the day, they would say, no, it's Annas. Caiaphas is just a political puppet. So anyway, if this sounds wrong, it is. There should indeed be only one high priest. Now, other accounts tell us that in this initial trial with Annas, Jesus suffered abuse, and it must be noted. I think as we go through this, it will be rather obvious, but we'll note that these trials were illegal. They were not done according to the old law. So the law of Moses that these Jewish leaders love to cite, love to make a great pomp and circumstance of their adherence to it, and the traditions of their fathers, and all these things that we've seen a number of times in John. These trials are complete farces. Not only in that, Jesus is here facing, the same kind of ridiculous allegations and trumped up charges that they've been trying to level against him all along. Right? Your disciples were eating corn on the Sabbath. You healed a man on the Sabbath. So not only are the charges themselves wrong. What they're doing here is wrong, but the way that they do it is wrong, including the fact that they're having this trial at night. That the law is just completely out the window here. They're flying by the seat of their pants, doing things however they want to. They couldn't care less. Verse 14, which I guess reminds us of part of the reason why that is, and the character of the people we're dealing with here. Now Caiaphas was he, which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. This goes back to John chapter 11. This was after Lazarus had been raised from the dead, verses 49 to 52. And if you back up just a little bit, verse 48, you're reminded of the fact that what's motivating them, what's motivating Caiaphas in particular, because he's the one driving this, is that they know they have this Roman government that they have to answer to, and if things get out of hand, that could be a problem, right? If the Romans see that there's unrest, that there's trouble going on in Judea, they may be inclined to step in with an even heavier hand, potentially remove the local officials, remove the religious leaders, and put people in that are more amenable to what Rome wants. And that makes sense, right? I mean, we were just discussing Caiaphas is the Roman guy. Annas, so far as we can tell, is really the legitimate. He's the one that should be high priest. Caiaphas, the younger one, his son-in-law, has been installed there by the Romans, so they're a Roman puppet, if you will. So it makes sense that he is heavily motivated to keep Rome happy. We discussed earlier when you had the scene in the garden, right? Judas shows up with this heavily armed band of soldiers with the lanterns, the torches, the swords, the staves. This is ridiculous. Jesus is peaceful. Everything regarding his ministry has been, why do they think this? The Jewish leaders, Caiaphas and company, I'm convinced, certainly know better. But they have to put this in a way that will get Rome to respond the way that they want to. So you're going to see this charge that Jesus is going about declaring himself to be king. He's trying to mount an insurrection. He's trying to gain all these followers. And again, too, remember this particular region and this particular time. This is in the early 30s AD. By 70 AD, there's going to be such a massive insurrection that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. Rome is going to just come and lay waste to the land because there are so many insurrectionists and zealots in this region. So probably not terribly difficult, even, some 35, 40 years earlier for Rome to swallow. This man is a danger. He's attracting a following. He needs to be dealt with. In just a little bit, when Jesus appears before Pilate, the Roman governor, Roman official, Pilate sees through that right away. He recognizes that is not the case. So you have all of these different motivations and factors kind of playing into it. But really, at the root of it, Caiaphas, the other Jewish leaders, they hate Jesus. They can't stand that he's attracted the following. He has the popularity that he does, that he's constantly calling them out, rightly so. And to some extent, they see him as a blasphemer because of the claims he makes regarding divinity. To the extent that they legitimately care, versus, there's the self-interest there. I don't know that either. I do find it telling that if you go back to chapter 9, when you had the trial over Jesus' healing of the blind man, I've mentioned a couple of times, you remember that division amongst the Pharisees, right? Some of them, because they had brought these trumped-up charges against Jesus because he healed a man on the Sabbath. Some of the Pharisees couldn't care less that he had actually healed this man. But you remember some of them, it says there was a division among the Pharisees because some of them were asking themselves the question, well, clearly he healed this man, so doesn't that mean this power could only have come from God? So there must be some truth to the things he's claiming. So when you have some of them like, you know, I think it's rather evident from chapter 11 that Caiaphas is purely self-interested. He couldn't care less about the truth in any of this. Others amongst the Pharisees, you know, do you have some there who legitimately think there's a blasphemy problem and they really do have a problem with it? It could very well be. That is to say, they are not purely cynical, you know, merely looking out for their own position. But anyway, kind of keep in the back of your mind too that division amongst the Pharisees is there, but it's going to be Caiaphas and his ilk who certainly carried the day here. All right, continuing on, verse 15. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Who was this? Who was this other disciple? It's generally understood to be John, and we kind of hashed that out at the outset of our study of the book. There are a number of things throughout this book that give these context clues that a lot of these that reference like this, or you know, you'll see the disciple that Jesus loved, are generally references to John himself. So you have Peter following Jesus, John following Jesus. Bear in mind the severity, the tenseness of the situation here. It is crystal clear to anyone here that Jesus is in trouble. He's in big trouble with the high priest, with the Jewish leaders, which is no secret, right? They've made their contempt for him openly known in Jerusalem. But he's also in trouble with the Romans, right? With this band of soldiers that accompanies Judas to the garden, and of course, like we said, he's ultimately going to go to Pilate for trial. So this is a bad situation. Very, very easy to see how anyone associated with him might also be quite fearful in this situation. So you have Peter and John, evidently the only two here. Simon Peter followed Jesus, so did another disciple. That disciple was known, I find this very interesting. We often talk about Peter's tremendous faith, and rightly so, right? I guess the main example that comes to mind regarding that is when he was the lone disciple willing to step out onto the water, right? To have the faith to do that. Even though he ultimately sank, he was the only one who would brave doing it in the first place. So Peter, certainly an individual of tremendous faith and courage. But so Peter and John go with them, right, as he's taken off to this trial. That disciple, again, generally believed to be John, was known unto the high priest and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. That says an awful lot about John's character to me. Do you remember back in chapter 11 when Jesus and company received word that Lazarus was sick, he was at the point of death? Jesus delayed their trip to Bethany, because there were other. He had other designs regarding the whole situation and what would ultimately come of it. But you remember the disciples' reaction on that occasion. It was essentially, are you seriously going to go to Bethany because it's close to Jerusalem? Don't you know what a hornet's nest that place is right now? The disciples knew that the Pharisees, they hated Jesus, hated those who followed after him. Remember the blind man put out of the synagogue because he refused to cave under pressure. They didn't want to go to Bethany. They ultimately did, to their credit. They voiced the concern, but they went. And that was just going close to Jerusalem. Right? Bethany is near Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a dangerous place for them right now. We don't really want to go there, but we will if we have to. That was their disposition. Here, they're in Jerusalem. Jesus has been arrested by a sizable armed guard. They're going to the palace of the high priest, who everyone knows hates him. The high priest knows John. It says he was known unto the high priest. And John went into the palace with Jesus. Again, if you want a good example of John's character, especially if you're contrasting it perhaps with the others and how all of this plays out, chapter 18, verse 15, I think is a prime example. Here you have someone who obviously has a great deal of courage and faith himself. Verse 16, but Peter stood at the door without. And this is why I say, a couple of, I think maybe two weeks ago in class, we were talking about how Jesus had spoken of the fact that the disciples were going to be scattered. Right? This is going back to chapter 16, verse 32. He's going to be left alone. The disciples would scatter. And we mentioned the fact that generally speaking, yes, that's exactly what happened. They all fled. When you go down the road a little bit, you come to the book of Acts, things are going to get back on track. But when this happens, they flee. Put yourselves in their shoes, right? It's understandable, I think. They flee, with the exception of two. John in particular, because we're going to see that John is also there later on at the cross. Peter, he's kind of there. He doesn't run away. He's still there. He's still right outside this trial. But you kind of see him hanging back. He's in the shadows, and we're about to see how he responds when he's challenged. But he's there. Again, to Peter's credit, he didn't totally run away. It's kind of like he didn't run away, but he's also not going out of the way to make himself known either. Okay, so Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, again John, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. Yet again, Peter's trying to kind of hide himself. John couldn't care less. He went into the palace, then he goes and talks to the person at the door and says, "Hey, Peter's out here. Let's bring him in here too." Verse 17. Then said the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, "Art not thou also one of this man's disciples?" What I find interesting is this. So John is known to the high priest. He spoke to the woman at the door, but she recognized Peter. So I don't know. Is Peter also known to the high priest, or is it just that this woman at the door, maybe she's been out and about in Jerusalem and she's encountered Jesus and his disciples. However it happened, she recognizes Peter. She's seen him somewhere before. She knows that he is one of Jesus's disciples. And she asks him, "Art not thou also one of this man's disciples?" Note how he responds. This is the way that Jesus said he would, right? He saith, "I am not." I don't know what John told the woman at the door. Right, verse 16. Peter's outside, John's inside. He goes and he speaks to the woman at the door and brings in Peter. I am assuming that he didn't go up to her and call out Peter by name and say, "Hey, you see that guy sitting out there? He's one of us too. That's Simon Peter. You need to bring him in." Evidently not, because the woman she recognizes Peter, but she still kind of has to ask, aren't you one of them too? So I don't know that John necessarily called him out to this woman and said, again, because she asks, and he tells her he isn't. What is her response to that? Who knows? Have you ever found yourself in that situation where you see someone, you're pretty sure you know who they are, and you say, "Hey, aren't you so-and-so? I've seen you before. In fact, I saw you with this other guy. You're one of his people. You're one of his friends." And they say, "Oh no, you've got a case of mistaken identity." I don't know, but she asks, and he says he doesn't know. So he's kind of crossed the line here, right? Up to this point, he's been hanging back. Unlike John, who bravely and confidently walks into the high priest's palace, knowing full well that the high priest knows who he is, and he's not trying to hide it all. He's willing to talk to the woman at the door so that Peter can be brought in. Up to that point, you can kind of forgive Peter for what he's done, right? He's had a little bit of trepidation. Now he has an opportunity to go in, to make himself known, and he outright lies. He does not want to be identified as one of Jesus' followers. And Jesus had told him that this was going to happen, that Peter was going to deny him. And you remember Peter's reaction. No, that'll never happen. I would never do that. Here it is. So perhaps a number of lessons and applications wrapped up in this for us. All right. So we're at 18:18. We will pick up there. Lord willing, come Sunday. We'll see what continues to unfold with this. As we have this trial beginning, Peter still sitting without. We'll see what else Peter has to say for himself the next time. Thank you very much for your kind attention today.
Over all the earth you reign on high, every mountain stream, every sunset sky. But my one request, Lord, my only aim, is that you reign in me again. Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Over every thought, over every word, may my life reflect the beauty of my Lord. 'Cause you mean more to me than any earthly thing. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power, over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? You are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me